The worst kind of fear isn't just trespassing in an abandoned place. It is realizing that the thing waiting for you in the dark is not human, and it knows your name. Growing up, I was a strict rationalist. I did not believe in ghosts, the occult, or anything supernatural. But all of that changed forever on a cold Friday night because of a girl my close friend Isaac had recently started seeing. Her name was Elena, and she was obsessed with urban exploration, specifically tracking down historical ruins and allegedly haunted locations. Out of the blue, Isaac called me up, mentioning we were taking a midnight drive to an abandoned Victorian estate about 30 minutes outside the city. He also casually dropped a detail that sealed the deal. Elena was bringing along her single, incredibly attractive friend, Chloe. Looking for an excuse to get out, I agreed. We picked up the girls near the highway, and as we drove into the night, Elena vibrated with excitement, talking about the estate and its high spiritual activity. I sat in the front seat, quietly smiling to myself, finding her seriousness deeply amusing. That amusement instantly died when Elena dug into a massive canvas bag between her feet and pulled out a classic wooden Ouija board and 2 thick pillar candles. Isaac laughed from the rearview mirror because he did not know about this either. We were not just exploring ruins. We were going to conduct a seance, but I was already in the truck, and I did not want to ruin the mood. Elena directed Isaac down narrow, pitch-black back roads flanked by overgrown fields and dense pine trees. The main gate of the mansion was rusted shut, forcing us to park on the shoulder and hike through the dark woods with our flashlights. Elena led us straight to a low basement window, which was the exact same one she had used during a daytime scout. Isaac and I hoisted the girls up, then climbed inside ourselves. The interior was completely frozen in time, smelling of damp wood and heavy rot. Dust motes danced in our flashlight beams as we walked past peeling wallpaper and old faded family portraits staring down at us from the dark hallway. It was terrifyingly silent, save for the loud, rhythmic creaking of warped floorboards beneath our sneakers. Eventually, Elena called us into the center of the grand parlor. She cleared the dust, set down the Ouija board, and lit the 2 candles, casting dancing shadows across the decaying walls. She made us sit in a circle and place our fingers lightly on the planchette. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then, without any warning, the wooden pointer began to glide across the board, spelling out H-E-L-L-O. I chuckled and looked at Isaac, assuming it was a joke. But Chloe glared at us, hissing, "Stop laughing and show some respect." Elena leaned in, asking, "What is your name?" The pointer moved again, spelling out G-R-E-G-O-R-Y. Then 30 years. I was entirely convinced one of the girls was pushing it. But then, our little game came to a grinding halt. A massive, echoing, metallic thump reverberated directly above our heads. It sounded like heavy furniture being violently overturned in the empty upstairs room. We all flinched, our hands flying off the board. Isaac jumped up, shining his light toward the ceiling, shouting if someone is out there. Elena panicked, insisting it was Gregory. But before we could even react, we watched in absolute horror as the planchette, with none of our fingers touching it, slid entirely on its own across the board, stopping dead on the word yes. Simultaneously, the unmistakable sound of heavy rhythmic footsteps began pacing back and forth across the ceiling right above us. Convinced the girls had hired a squatter or a friend to pull an elaborate prank, Isaac and I ignored their desperate pleas not to go up. We marched out of the parlor and ascended the creaking grand staircase. At the top, we pushed open the first bedroom door. In the far corner sat a heavy wooden closet door, cracked open about an inch. We held our breath and listened closely. And then, from the pitch-black interior behind that door, we heard it. A clear, heavy, wet human exhale. That single sound shattered our courage. We spun around, sprinted down the stairs, and burst back into the parlor, only to find it completely empty. The candles were blown out. The Ouija board was gone. The girls had vanished into thin air without a single sound. Terrified, we bolted out of the basement and sped back to the truck. Isaac tried calling Elena repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. She had blocked his number completely. To this day, I still do not know who or what was walking on that ceiling, or whose breath we heard in that closet. But I will never ever mess with a Ouija board again. The worst kind of fear isn't just hearing a voice in an empty house. It is realizing that the thing speaking in the dark knows a name that nobody else alive is supposed to remember. Back in the autumn of 2015, I went through a massive horror phase, becoming completely obsessed with the paranormal and occult. With Halloween coming up, I ordered a standard Ouija board online. When it arrived, I hid it under my bed, waiting for the perfect night when my parents would be out of town and the house would be completely empty. That Friday night arrived, and I convinced my younger sister Evelyn to try it with me. We sat at the large dining room table in the shadows, placing our fingers on the plastic planchette. At first, it was just awkward. We giggled, and to spice things up, I nudged the piece around a bit, but Evelyn called my bluff immediately. Bored with the childish gimmick, she stood up after 10 minutes and went upstairs to sleep. I went back to my room, but I could not shake the fixation. Reading online forums, I learned that first-time users often needed quiet, isolation, and late-night hours. Around 1 a.m., making sure my sister was sound asleep, I crept downstairs in my sock, set the board in the center of the dark dining room, and whispered the exact same questions. I sat there completely alone for 20 minutes, but the board never moved. The house remained dead silent. Just as I was about to give up, a faint rhythmic sound echoed from the second floor. It sounded like soft shuffling footsteps moving slowly across the upstairs hallway. I froze, assuming Evelyn had woken up for water and heard me. Then the footsteps stopped. A second later, they were followed by a low, muffled, rhythmic female voice. The sound was coming from the ceiling directly above where I sat. My stomach dropped as I realized a terrifying detail. The room right above our dining room was not my sister's bedroom. It was my older brother's bedroom, and he was away at university 3 states over. His room was supposed to be completely vacant and locked. I slipped out of my chair, left the board on the table, and crept up the stairs. As I ascended, the muffled voice grew louder, clearer, and more intense, undeniably emanating from inside my brother's empty room. I tried to convince myself Evelyn was playing a sophisticated prank. I reached the top, walked down the hall, and pressed my ear directly against the wood of my brother's bedroom door. The voice on the other side did not belong to my sister. It was a dry, raspy, ancient cadence belonging to an elderly woman, chanting the exact same phrase over and over in a low, terrifyingly rhythmic drone. Through the wood, I clearly made out the words, "Grandma's here, Georgie. Grandma's here, Georgie." A wave of ice-cold terror crashed over me, and every hair on my arm stood on end. Georgie was the private, intimate childhood nickname that my deceased grandmother had used exclusively for me when I was a toddler. It was a family detail my younger sister did not even know existed, as she was too young to remember it before our grandmother passed away. In a moment of pure, panicked adrenaline, I threw the bedroom door open and slapped the wall switch, flooding the space with light. The room was completely vacant. My brother's bed was neatly made, the dust on his desk undisturbed, the windows locked from the inside, and the rasping voice had ceased the exact millisecond the light bulb clicked on. I slammed the door shut, sprinted to my room, locked the deadbolt, and dove beneath my comforter until the morning sun finally broke through. Even now, over a decade later, the memory of that dry, raspy voice chanting my childhood name in the dark remains as sharp and terrifying as a razor. It is genuinely fascinating how many households possess a dust-coated Ouija board hidden away in some dark, forgotten corner of their property. They sit there for decades, completely abandoned, wedged between old board games and broken holiday decorations, collecting layers of grime while the inhabitants of the house walk past them every single day without a second thought. Most people who own one have probably never even set the planchette on the wood. I first discovered what a Ouija board actually was when I was 16 years old. Down an internet rabbit hole late one rainy Tuesday night, intrigued and a little unsettled by the stories I was reading, I walked into the kitchen the next morning and casually asked my parents if we had one hidden somewhere in our house. To my absolute surprise, my mother stopped washing the dishes, turned around and admitted that yes, she actually did have one. She told me it was buried somewhere deep in the storage closet with all the old family board games from her college years. That particular closet was located in the furthest corner of our unfinished basement, tucked away right past the noisy, leaking water heater in the laundry room. It was a cramped, pitch-black space stuffed to the ceiling with my parents' old college gear, moldering textbooks, and plastic bins of childhood mementos. Because I had always possessed a bit of a superstitious streak, I became instantly desperate to find it and try it out. The very next afternoon, I managed to convince my mother to help me excavate the closet. She agreed, but only on the strict condition that we didn't disrupt the neat rows of boxes and storage bins that she had meticulously organized over the last 20 years. We spent a good 45 minutes carefully moving heavy plastic crates and dusting off old luggage. Then lo and behold, tucked away on the lowest shelf behind a stack of vintage photo albums, she pulled out a worn, faded rectangular cardboard box. The lid was instantly recognizable. It featured the bold, unmistakable word Ouija printed across the center, flanked by an eerie illustration of two skeletal hands gripping a wooden pointer. The edges of the box were practically disintegrating, the cardboard frayed and splitting from decades of basement humidity. Even though my mother claimed she and her friends had only experimented with it twice in their youth before getting too freaked out and locking it away forever. The moment my mother went back upstairs to finish her chores, my mind started racing. I immediately grabbed my phone and texted a few of my closest friends, proposing a late-night gathering for the upcoming weekend. As fate would have it, my parents were scheduled to be away on an overnight trip to attend a wedding, meaning I would have the entire house to myself. To heighten the atmosphere and make things as scary as possible, we planned the session for right after dark. My friend Mateo, who was 17 and the only one of us with a driver's license, picked up our other friend Lucas in his beat-up pickup truck and drove over to my place around 9 p.m. By the time they arrived, it was completely pitch black outside. Without my parents there, the house felt massive, empty, and strangely quiet. My 14-year-old brother, Toby, was also hanging out downstairs playing video games, so I managed to coax him into joining us, figuring that having 4 people would make the experience more intense. We decided to set up the game on the hardwood floor of the finished attic loft, which had been converted into my bedroom a few years prior. It was a large, drafty space with exposed wooden beams and a single window overlooking the dark backyard. To set the mood, we extinguished the main overhead lights, plunging the room into total darkness. Then I clicked on a heavy tactical metal flashlight and set it directly on the floorboards in the far corner of the loft, angling the sharp white beam horizontally across the room so it perfectly illuminated the wooden surface of the board. The 4 of us sat cross-legged in a tight circle on one side of the board, our knees practically touching. We took a deep breath, extended our hands, and lightly placed our fingertips on the smooth plastic planchette resting in the center of the alphabet. Since none of us had ever actually played with a Ouija board before, we started with basic, standard introductory questions. I leaned forward, my voice echoing slightly in the rafters, and said, "If there is an unseen presence in this room with us tonight, move the pointer." For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. We all sat there staring at each other's hands, listening to the sound of our own breathing. But then a sudden heavy friction seemed to take over the plastic. To our collective shock, the planchette began to slide slowly across the polished wood. It didn't jerk, it moved with a deliberate, smooth weight, stopping squarely over the word yes. Toby immediately let out a nervous laugh, loudly accusing Lucas of intentionally pushing it to scare everyone. And while I secretly suspected that one of them was cheating, we all silently agreed to play along and keep our hands in place to maintain the immersion. We began taking turns passing the questions around the circle. Toby, trying to mask his nervousness, leaned in and asked, "How old are you?" The planchette remained still for a moment, then began to drift toward the numbers at the bottom of the board. It slid directly to the number 6, paused for a second, and then migrated sharply over to the number 7. 67. We all looked at each other, our eyes wide in the dim flashlight beam. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. It felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the air pressure had dropped. But we kept going, refusing to break the spell. Eventually, the tension got to me, and I decided to push the envelope. I looked down at the board and asked a question I probably shouldn't have. Are you an entity of malice? Are you a demon? The pointer didn't hesitate this time. It aggressively slid straight across the board, slamming into the word yes with enough force that we could hear the plastic click against the wood. At that exact moment, the tension broke. We all burst into loud, nervous laughter, trying to shake off the genuine dread creeping into our chests. We openly told each other to stop messing around, assuming that Mateo or Lucas was pulling an incredibly well-executed prank. But the exact second our laughter peaked, the tactical flashlight in the far corner of the loft snapped off completely. The room fell into an absolute pitch-black, suffocating silence. The laughter died instantly. Who did that? Stop messing with the lights, Lucas whispered, his voice trembling slightly. But it was physically impossible for any of us to have touched it. The flashlight was over 10 feet away from the closest person in our circle, sitting completely isolated in the corner. I dropped my hands from the board and crawled across the hardwood floor on my hands and knees, feeling around in the dark until my fingers brushed against the cold metal casing of the light. I picked it up and frantically smashed the power button over and over again. Nothing happened. The circuit was completely dead. Genuinely terrified now, I scrambled over to my nightstand, blindly reaching out until I found the switch to my bedside lamp. I flicked it on, flooding the attic with a warm yellow glow that illuminated the pale, sweat-slicked, and utterly freaked out expressions of my brother and my friends. I tried to dismiss the whole thing with a shaky laugh, telling them that it was just an incredibly creepy coincidence for the flashlight batteries to die at that exact fraction of a second. But a deep, sinking part of me refused to believe it. We unanimously decided to end the session right then and there. The energy in the attic loft felt entirely corrupted, like someone was standing right behind us watching. We hurried down the stairs, left my bedroom behind, and went out into the backyard just to escape the heavy walls of the house and breathe some fresh air. We sat on the patio furniture for an hour, talking about sports and school, desperately trying to normalize the night. When my friends finally decided it was time to leave, Mateo drove Lucas home, and Toby went down to his own bedroom on the first floor to go to sleep. I realized with a knot of dread that I had to return to the attic loft alone. Before I could even think about sleeping, I walked into my room, jammed the Ouija board back into its frayed cardboard box, and carried it all the way down 2 flights of stairs to the kitchen. I stuffed it deep inside a kitchen cabinet, unable to stomach the thought of sleeping in the same room with that object. When I finally returned to my bed and cut the lights, I buried my face under the heavy comforter. I intentionally avoided looking at my phone, skipping my usual routine of scrolling through social media for an hour, wanting nothing more than to fall asleep as fast as humanly possible. Just as my consciousness began to drift into a shallow, exhausted sleep, a sudden, violent crash echoed from inside my walk-in closet. It sounded like something solid and heavy had been violently thrown against the floorboards from a high shelf. I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering furiously against my ribs, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. I stared into the darkness toward the closet door, which was cracked open about an inch. My hands shaking, I reached over and threw on the nightstand lamp. I slowly swung my legs out of bed and walked across the creaking floorboards, approaching the closet. The light switch sat on the exterior drywall right next to the frame. I reached out, flipped the switch, and sent a sharp beam of yellow light flooding into the closet, which cast a bright rectangle through the narrow horizontal gap at the bottom of the closet door. My breath caught completely in my throat and I froze solid. 2 distinct, elongated shadows clearly cast by a pair of human feet. Standing directly on the other side of the wood, facing the door, were perfectly silhouetted in the light leaking under the crack. Someone was standing inside my closet, waiting. A wave of pure, primal adrenaline hit me. I let out a raw, unfiltered scream from my brother, Toby, and sprinted out of the attic loft, flying down the hallway and tumbling into his bedroom. Panting and sobbing, I frantically explained to him exactly what I had just seen under the doorframe. and practically dragged him back up the stairs to confront whoever was in my room. When we burst back into the attic loft, the closet light was still burning brightly, throwing its yellow beam onto the floor. But when I looked down, the shadows beneath the door crack were entirely gone. Gathering every single ounce of courage I had left, I stepped forward and yanked the closet door completely open. The closet was entirely empty of human life. There was no one hiding among my clothes. However, lying right in the dead center of the floorboards was a heavy wooden memory box that I had built years ago in a middle school arts and crafts class. I used it to store old childhood memorabilia, rocks and coins, and it always sat securely pushed back on the very top shelf of the closet. It had somehow been knocked clean off the shelf, flipping over and scattering its contents across the floor. There were no open windows in the closet, no ventilation shafts, no drafts in the world that could have moved that heavy box, let alone hurled it off a high shelf. It made absolutely no logical sense. I didn't sleep in the attic that night. I went down and slept uncomfortably in my parents' bed, leaving all the hallway lights on. For the next 2 weeks, I refused to step foot in my bedroom after dark, choosing instead to sleep on the small mattress in our downstairs guest room. Eventually, as the days bled into weeks, the sheer terror faded enough for me to return to my own bed. But the memory of those 2 feet standing in the closet light remains entirely unshakable. I haven't touched a Ouija board since that night, and I never will again.